Located in modern-day Sicily, Syracuse's location was a cornerstone of its success. Geographically, it sat on an expanse of fertile lands, perfect for farming surpluses of grains, olives, and grapes, a crucial economic base. Its first settlement was on the island of Ortigia, which along with nearby mainland area created a naturally defensible location and successful port city. Syracuse also featured two natural harbors, highly valued for trade and naval purposes, including the harbor of Lachios, which was used for docking in the kingdom's fleet. Interestingly, the site was also where the catastrophic Athenian defeat occurred during the Sicilian expedition. Cultural aspects of Syracuse. Under Huron II, Syracuse was a hub for culture. The Syracusan court was a major center for intellectual courts, the creation of Greek research, writing, and art forms, often commissioned by the rich. As mentioned, it was the birthplace of Archimedes, the creator of polymath and a great progressor for science. Royal propaganda was further a big part of the culture, as Huron II created coinage with his own face and queen's face while he was still living, a key element of Syracuse's material culture to project power. As you can see on the right, there's Huron II on a coin. This period was characterized by immense cultural exchange. Located in Sicily, the city was a unique area of cultural diffusion, trading and interacting with the Greek, Carthaginian, and Roman empires, being placed right in between them. Syracuse was based on an agrarian economy. The profit from this economy, or crop yield, drove the early acquisition of strategic lands like Acrii and Casminai, as shown at the very top of the map on the right. Its port was also central to the region, creating crucial trade networks that were greatly stimulated by the proximity of the Carthaginians and Romans. Particularly during the Punic Wars, trade was kind of catalyzed further. In terms of coinage and finance, Syracuse was well known for its large volume of minting, which was necessary for general circulation and maintenance of the empire, again demonstrating the kingdom's financial power. As you can see on the right is an example of this coinage. Syracuse's political influence is key. It was the last great independent Greek kingdom in the western Mediterranean, primarily during the reign of Huron II from 270 to 215 BCE. Its strength rested on a crucial act that was its strategic geopolitical positioning, being situated between two great powers, the Romans and Carthaginians. As you can see on the map at the top right, the Romans are in red, while Syracuse is the small green part and the Carthaginians are the purple part. Huron was a master diplomat. He maintained control of Syracuse by establishing a friendship or phila with Rome, beginning during the First Punic War, while also engaging with Carthage and other Greek powers. However, Huron also employed royal political propaganda. He used large-scale public works in the minting of coinage to display his wealth and influence, reinforcing the image of a powerful Greek state. Finally, the city demonstrated incredible political defiance. Even after Huron's death during the Roman siege of 212 to 211 BCE, it took Rome many months to seize control. This is kind of just a testament to Syracuse's political strength, to be able to hold on that long. The aesthetics of Syracuse. Monumental architecture was key. It served as public demonstration of the kingdom's wealth and influence. Major projects included the construction of the altar of Huron II and the rebuilding of the Great Theater, as you can see on the bottom right. In artisan culture, local goldsmiths and silversmiths created fine material culture, dating back to Huron's kingdom, though only few examples have been discovered. In an iconography, the city's famous and ancient emblem was the face of Arethusa, along with depictions of Zeus as an eagle, grasping lightning bolts to show royal power and connection to the divine. The technology of Syracuse, mainly demonstrated through Archimedes. The discussion of Syracuse's technology kind of centers around Archimedes, its most famous resident. He lived around 287 to 212 BCE. He is known to be at the pinnacle of mathematicians and scientists of his time, making crucial contributions to engineering and establishing mechanics of science, like buoyancy. During the Roman siege, Archimedes famously designed remarkable military technology and contraptions for war. These included things like grappling hooks and the legendary focused mirror burners, which you can't be certain are historically accurate or not. At the top is a type of sling that Archimedes designed to drop on ships, boulders. And then on the bottom is a grappling hook. Regarding religious aspects of Syracuse, the city maintained traditional Greek cults. This is evidenced by the remains of structures like the Temple of Athena. As you can see on the bottom right, that's a computer-generated rendering of what it would potentially look like based off of its ruins. The ruler cult was central to legitimizing Huron II's power. It centered on him and his family members, reinforcing his authority through religious association and to further illustrate his power. Another religious aspect was Syracuse's mythology. In mythology, Syracuse held strong ties to the stories of Persephone's abduction and the nymph Arethusa, the latter of whom is seen on coinage alongside dolphins, as you can see at the top right.
In the early period, Syracuse grew from a Corinthian colony into a major Western Greek power. It had natural advantages like fresh water, a deep harbor, and strong trade access, and these were intentionally used to shape political and military expansion. Gelon and Huron I used public architecture, especially the early theater, to announce Syracuse as its cultural center, which was equal to competitive mainland. Under Dionysius I, the city became heavily fortified, with the Euryalus fortress showing how cities responded to threats through massive building. The phase highlights a theme from class, urban form as both a defense and political messaging. In the Hellenistic period, especially under Huron II, Syracuse reached a cultural and architectural peak. They didn't just construct big monuments, they used them to communicate. The altar of Huron II, for example, was one of the largest altars in the ancient world. Its scale made a political statement. It tells the public that these rituals can be used to reinforce loyalty and project a king-like authority onto the city. Huron's renovations to the theater also showed that rulers used public spectacle to shape civic identity. He invested in performance space to invest in the idea of Syracuse as an intellectual and culturally unified city. At the end of this period, the Roman siege really just highlights Syracuse's geopolitical importance. Archimedes created machines that weren't just inventions that were clever. They really showed that scientific innovation was tied to civic pride, and society really placed an emphasis on this. When Rome finally took the city, it showed Syracuse's role as the last major independent Greek power in the West. After the Roman conquest, Syracuse became a provincial capital, and it's really interesting the layering that happened. So Roman administration, Byzantine rule, Arab Norman occupations, and then later on Christianization, all these groups built directly on top of each other. So you can really see the layers both physically, literally, and also metaphorically that exist in this area. And this teaches us that ancient cities really never disappear, they transform. The Temple of Athena later became a cathedral. It shows how powers can legitimize themselves by inheriting sacred spaces of the past and repurposing them for their own values and ideals. Also, later on excavations in the 18th century revealed that these layers were very deeply intertwined, more so than scholars at the time thought. The Greek theater, the altar, the fortress, all of these phases of digging uncovered architecture, but also the political priorities of the society that built and modified it later on. So what does Syracuse illustrate? When we take a step back, Syracuse serves as a powerful case study on how cities are instruments of power. Their planners used fortifications, harbors, religious spaces to control people, control land, and project authority, things that city-states, nations to this day still do. Another lesson is resilience. Syracuse survived repeated conquests, not by staying the same, but by adapting. They absorbed Greek, Carthaginian, Roman, and Christian worlds into its folds and fabrics, and that's what allowed the city to continue surviving so long, rather than their rigid standards, which other cities had that ended up leading to collapse. This really makes a perfect example about the urban life cycle that we talk about constantly in this course. Growth, transformation, reuse, and reinterpretation are constantly happening to cities all over the world, which we can learn about by studying ancient cities and then apply to the modern world today and improve our understanding of how the world works. Syracuse ties directly into major themes of ancient urbanism that we studied in this class. Monuments actively perform power. So, for example, Athens' Periclean program, they use scale, visibility, and strategic placement in order to shape the identity of the city. The city also shows how ritual landscapes work. Theater, altar, the Ortygia sanctuary, these all create a hierarchy of sacred as well as political spaces that end up reinforcing the authority in the city. Syracuse is also a great case study and example of urban life cycles. Greek temples become Roman civic buildings, later Christian churches. This mirrors patterns that we've seen in places like Rome and Constantinople as well, where layers of identity are built on top of each other. The multicultural character of Syracuse, which is formed through the Greek colonization, Carthaginian conflict, Roman rule, and Byzantine Christianity, shows that these ancient cities were very dynamic contact zones, and cultural blending was very common and almost a necessity.
Syracuse was founded in 734 BCE and was originally settled as a Greek colony from the city of Corinth on the island of Ortygia and later spread to the mainland of Sicily, with topographical advantages such as natural harbors, freshwater springs, fertile surrounding land, and a defensible island location. Syracuse rose to become a major power in Sicily with a large population, some sources suggesting numbers reaching as high as 100,000 people in the city. The island of Ortygia remained as the historic and religious center, whereas the mainland Syracuse served as the primary city and municipality. Syracuse's primary fortification was the extensive Urulus fortress built by Dionysius in the Archaic period. The fortress had ditches, tunnels, and a keep on a plateau overlooking the city. The city also had defenses along the isthmus, the narrow strip connecting the island and the mainland. The city had a well-planned orthogonal grid system on wide main streets that ran north to south and narrow side streets that ran east to west. One of the first central public spaces was the Temple of Athena, which was one of the key features, as well as the Greek Theater of Syracuse and the Altar of Huron, which was one of the largest altars discovered from antiquity, and the Temple of Apollo, which is one of the oldest known Doric temples in Sicily. The Syracuse Temple of Athena was built in 480 BCE by the tyrant Gelon, honoring his victory in the Battle of Chimera over the Carthaginians. The primary purpose of the temple is to honor and worship the patron goddess of Syracuse. The temple is 22 meters wide and 55 meters long, built in the Doric style. This monumental building was erected on the highest part of the island of Ortygia, creating a symbol of wealth and power of Syracuse. The temple was brightly colored and decorated and featured a large golden shield on the pediment meant to be seen by those approaching the city by boat, symbolizing strength. Inside the temple, according to Roman texts, the panels had paintings depicting historical battles such as the cavalry battle against the Carthaginians. The temple depictions in grandeur greatly celebrated Syracusan military power and warfare and portraits of the city's tyrants. There was also a stela containing a cult statue of Athena, part of an altar, and a treasury in the back room. The Temple of Athena was later turned into a church in the 7th century CE, and the original Doric columns were incorporated into the walls of the new church. And eventually in the 11th century, when Syracuse was conquered by the Normans, it was incorporated into the Cathedral of Syracuse, as seen in the bottom right and the left pictures. while the top right shows a reconstruction of the temple. The Syracuse Temple of Apollo is one of the oldest known Doric temples in Sicily, built in the early 6th century BCE, and was built entirely of limestone and sedimentary rock because of the expense of marble. The Temple of Apollo is located on the island of Ortigia on the northern edge closest to the bridge connecting the island to mainland Sicily. The temple was likely built to honor Apollo by early colonists seeking favor in order to provide healing and protection to the colony, but later came to serve as a sign of Syracusan power while warning visitors as it overlooked the bay. Some of its key features include a peristyle with 6 columns on the front and 17 on the side, which is depicted in the picture on the left, and there is an inscription on the top step dedicating the temple to Apollo. The inner chamber had 3 aisles by 2 rows of internal columns and a wooden roof. The Temple of Apollo was brightly colored with painted terracotta decoration, including roof decor and gorgon heads in the pediment to serve as a symbol to warn visitors of the power of Syracuse. The interior of the Temple of Apollo had a large cult image in the inner restricted area at the back of the naos called the Adyton, which was typical in Sicilian temples. The Temple of Apollo was later turned into a Byzantine church and went through a series of transformations, and the temple was partially dismantled. Then in 1890, the remains were uncovered and are now visible as ruins in Syracuse, depicted in the bottom right. The altar with the reconstruction on the second is located on the slopes of the Colle Temenite on mainland Sicily. The site was the largest altar found from antiquity, and the altar was partially carved from bedrock and built using masonry stones and had 2 levels. The entire structure was covered in plaster and featured a Doric triglyph frieze. It had a central platform where ceremonies and sacrifices would take place. The ramps were symmetrical and flanked by large statues called telemones, which are male figures used as pillars. The altar was built by King Hiero II and dedicated to Zeus the Liberator to celebrate the removal of the tyrant Thrasybulus in 466 BCE. The altar was a site used for massive public ceremonies and celebrations, with ancient sources citing up to 450 bulls being sacrificed at one time in the honor of the fall of the tyrant. The altar was a symbol of wealth and grandeur of Syracuse, not only from the size of the monument, but also the extent of the offerings made. It was also a political and cultural reminder of the fall of the last tyrant and the celebration surrounding it, as well as being a religious monument dedicated to Zeus the Liberator, with all of the offerings thanking Zeus.
Looking at the timeline of the history of excavation, first from the late 18th to 19th century, we have the early Antiquian excavations, and here Cavalier Saverio Landolina conducted excavations, finding notable artifacts. And this was some of the first documented excavations at the site, and it was done for the purpose of founding a museum, specifically for the city's rich history. Next, in 1780, we have the excavation of the altar of Hieron, and again the excavation of the sanctuary first began in 1780, led by Capodici, with more excavations later taking place by Landolina in 1813, Cavallari in 1839, and Orsi in 1904, and it was found to be a symbol of political power and kingship. Then next, in 1839, we have the start of the excavation of the Syracuse Greek Theater. In 1839, Duke of Ceradofalco conducts the first systematic approach to the excavations. Then next, in the mid-1800s, Saverio Landolina and Francesco Saverio Cavallari clear the debris from the site. Then from 1895 to 1934, Paolo Orsi directs an archaeological campaigns. Then finally, in 1988, Giuseppe Vosa completes the final excavations of the site. Then in 1895, we have the excavation of the necropolis of Pantalaika, and it was excavated by Paolo Orsi. Here he excavated more than 4,000 tombs, which were carefully cut into the walls of a limestone gorge. And this gives us a look on the social organization of the society. Then after, in 1910, we have the excavations under the Cathedral Square, and these excavations from 1910 to today of the Piazza Duomo by Paolo Orsi revealed that it was the chosen site of the Oikos, and here a small temple was built interlinking religion and society. Some of the most important historical sources derived from Syracuse is first the history of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides, and second the Library of History by Diodorus Siculus. The history of the Peloponnesian War was written in 431 BCE, and here Thucydides describes the developments during the Peloponnesian War, focusing on both Syracuse and the arrival of Gylippus, a Spartan general. In this text, it describes many of the battles. One in particular reveals the strengthening of Syracuse navy, achieving a tactical victory in the sea battle. In more broad terms, the text describes the breaking point of the Athenian army through the loss of morale and the loss of control of the sea thanks to Syracuse. Our other important historical source, the Library of History by Diodorus Siculus, is a collection of books providing a long narrative of the history of Syracuse, including different phases of ruling, such as the Diomedes tyranny, the Dionysius I and II, Timoleon, Hiron II, and the Roman conquest in 212 BCE. Lastly, on the basis of the remaining questions, debates, and mysteries, we have questions on the exact function of the altar of Huron. Some experts argue that it's either for sacrifices, celebration, or political purposes, but the main use isn't quite clear yet. Then next, many experts argue on how did the tyrants such as Huron and Dionysius legitimize their rule, and these debates have centered around the identities that these figures manipulated to gain support, but we don't know what the main identity they manipulated just yet. Then lastly, there is questions on how accurate the founding archaic myths and legends are, and we also have questions on what do they tell us about Syracuse's culture and society.